Joining me now is U.S. Senate candidate Dr. Valerie McCray. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
And thank you for inviting me. This is quite the honor. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start with, what do you want the state of Indiana to know about you for people who don't know you?
I'm not the career politician. People know that part. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I'm bringing a different eye, a different vision to Washington, D.C. when we get there. So everything I do will have a mental health lens, because we have to keep mental health as top of our priority. So that's the main thing, because I know personally that, you know, the wealth of a nation is nothing without the mental health of a nation. So we need to start there.
When did you find yourself interested in politics, and what makes you want to serve Hoosiers in the U.S. Senate?
You know, this started as a thought, just sort of that small wave when I was working in the prison systems. And I started at Indiana Women's Prison, for example, and I was looking at the women there, and most of them were fantastic, beautiful creations. They were very talented. They were soul. They had a lot of soul. They had a lot of energy. And I thought, what a waste. And when I listened to their stories of incest and domestic violence and poverty and drugs and all these things that they contended with in their families, it's like, you know, we could do better. What if we, you know, affected policy such that these people would not fall through the cracks and we wouldn't lose so much of our talent to the incarceration system, to the justice system. And that was the first thought. Then as we went on, and of course that compiles to the point of, I've got to get there. I've got to do something. But that's the initial thought. That's when I switched to that mind frame of a crisis at a time clinician to thinking about the bigger picture, the bigger umbrella of how do we fix this nationwide.
What do you think the bigger picture is?
The bigger picture is dealing with those systemic issues that cause mental health stress in the first place, whether it's jobs that pay enough. It's about, you know what, there's two words, dignity and purpose. And without those things, dignity and purpose, everything else falls apart. So dignity in job and wages, dignity in medical care, dignity for women and being able to make their own choices. All of this comes to dignity and purpose. Gun violence has to deal with dignity and purpose. All of that. Those are the two words that I fall back on. Thanks for that question, because I never really thought about it in those terms.
Absolutely. Obviously, politics is very divisive at this time.
Yes.
Republicans and Democrats constantly butting heads over things, a lot of negative conversations. With that being said, though, do you feel like there are any failures of the Democratic Party that you feel you could help fix if elected?
Yes, bridging that gap of conversation. One thing about being a clinical psychologist, about being a psychologist, is having those conversations and finding those common grounds. You know, when we start with mental health, for example, and I don't want everything to be about mental health, because I also am a big advocate for environmental justice and also for environmental justice, also for wages, also for Medicare for all. But what I wanted to talk about mostly is about how do we move forward and how do we have those conversations. And what I'm finding is that all of us know someone that we're either afraid of or afraid for, because of the mental health issues, because of the crisis in their family, because of the stress in their family. That's one place where we can bridge those gaps, where we can start having real conversations. We all want the same thing. We all want education for our children. We all want safe spaces. We all want to have medical care and that be, you know, not ruined by a medical bill. We all want the same things, but we have to get politics out of the way so we can find those common grounds. And I think that where I will come in is being able to bridge those gaps, to sort through the BS, to sort through all the cultish activities, and really get to the heart of the issues. Say, okay, we're here. Let's talk about this. What do we have in common, and how do we solve it?
And you've touched on this a little bit, but what issues do you want to prioritize?
You know, for the sake of women, because this is a danger zone, that has to come first and foremost. We have to turn back the Roe v. Wade issue. We have to turn back that Dobbs decision, because what we've seen is not only a falling back from Roe v. Wade, but being archaic and being very punitive to women and doctors that try to treat women with abortion care. And it's not about just abortion, it's about everything connected to that. We are losing doctors and OBGYNs in hospitals. 1/3 of Indiana people, women, do not have access to abortion, to just not even abortion care, but just general maternity care. Mm-hmm. That is scary. So we have to address that first and foremost before we lose more women like Tasha Sobaski. So we have to really, get on that right away. We've got a history of women dying. Why would we go back to that? Why would we turn back the clock of that? So that would be the main thing. And I work with children of violence. We have to do something about, sensible gun laws here in Indiana, because we're losing our youth to that. So those things are important to me. There's so much. I hate to narrow it down, but those are probably 2 priorities, and wages, of course, affordable housing. Those kind of go hand in hand. There's no place to live that is cost efficient. It's starting to be a strain on, especially seniors that are on fixed incomes. It's starting to be a strain on young families who can't afford a place of their own. So I'm looking forward to what Kamala Harris's policies are talking about as far as getting people into starter homes, getting people into those first homes, and also the environmental, the economic piece as well, helping startup companies get started, because that's the basis of Indianapolis, of this country, is having those small businesses, because that's the bedrock of the United States, the small businesses.
And as I'm out talking to voters, and I've talked to a lot of them, inflation is a big conversation amongst them. How are we going to put food on the table? How am I going to pay my bills? What policies do you think can fix inflation in this country?
I think that we can't conflate inflation with price gouging, because that's what we've seen, is a lot of greed and price gouging. The profits of these countries the profits of these companies are astronomical. They're growing. They're not putting it back into the hands of the people. They're not giving bigger wages or anything like that. This is simple price gouging. Inflation is twofold. We came out of the whole inflation, the whole COVID crisis, in better shape than the rest of the countries surrounding. The Biden administration was really good at holding back inflation. Although it looks differently, of course, at the table when you're trying to buy groceries, but the fact of the matter is it could have been a lot worse, and they're working to make sure it's not. The price gouging is the issue. They don't have to charge what they're charging for the products people are needing. They're doing it because they can. And we have to do something about that, really find a way to slap the hands of these companies that choose to put all this burden on the working and middle class people.
Another big topic of conversation is the border. American people are worried about that. What policies do you think can be brought forward to help what some people are calling a border crisis?
I think that crisis was made partially. For one, I've been at the border, and I've seen how families are divided by that wall, and that wall is ugly. It's dividing people, generations of people that have crossed over peacefully and just worked on one side. We've always had migrant workers. We've always had people going back and forth. It's a crisis because we're making it a crisis, because we're very slow at processing people. It's a crisis because people are having these conversations about drugs, and because we haven't stopped our demand for drugs. We haven't stopped our allowing guns to be going over the border, so that now we have these cartels that are armed and they're causing a lot of havoc. We are needing to find solutions so that we as people come over, we can greet them humanely, we can greet them with resources that we have without stretching the resources that we already have here. So to make sure we're not burdening the communities that are here, but at the same rate, be aware that we need to welcome people as well. That's just how the world works. And as our world warms, there's mass migration all the time anyway, but it's even worse with global warming. It's even worse with the various wars that are going on. We've always had an influx. We have to just talk to other countries and figure out who can take who when. How can we absorb people and keep them moving and make sure that they're treated well wherever they go? And that should be our goal. We're humans. And to make sure that people can migrate if they need to in a safe and humane way. You know, we are our brother's keepers. Absolutely.
Your opponent says that with so many people from other countries coming in, it's hurting the housing crisis more. And housing is a big topic of discussion, especially when I'm speaking to young voters. They're concerned about being able to afford rent. They may feel like they're never going to be able to buy a home. Do you think that there are federal policies that can help increase housing stock and make it more affordable? And do you feel that immigration is impacting housing affordability?
Absolutely not. That's the biggest BS I've ever heard. It makes no sense. It takes a lot of paperwork to buy a home. It takes a lot of money. It takes a job. It takes all these things to be able to sign a lease. They are not our issues. Our issues are that we have big, huge corporations, big hedge funds buying up properties by the droves. You know, and my opponent is, you know, he's being funded by some of these corporations that are buying up residential properties. He's funded by some of these people, so he's going to say that. How are you going to blame immigrants for the housing crisis? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It just doesn't even add up. To conflate those two. The thing about housing and affordability, we have to do something about all of these hedge funds that are buying up properties. We have to make it not a lucrative thing for them to block out regular people from buying homes and houses. So a lot of these hedge funds own thousands and thousands and thousands of properties, and they're not releasing them. As a matter of fact, they're bidding for properties over the market value so that you and I, our children, cannot go and buy a home at a reasonable rate. They're in there bidding, they take it, and no one has the opportunity to even bid on the process, bid on these homes. We have to stop that. Not only that, most of them don't even live in the towns and the cities that they're buying homes from. So you have people owning homes that don't live in your communities, which means you also don't have the upkeep, you don't have the sense of community. So this is a problem on a lot of different levels. This is what we have to stop.
Do you think there's a federal policy that could be enacted to stop that from happening?
We will be developing one. That will be something our team will be working on from day one. Kamala Harris's team, she's talked about this as well. And I was like, gosh, she gets it. She gets that this is what we're dealing with. So in one of her speeches, like, yes, she gets it. So hopefully we can formulate policies, write a bill that would put a stop to this or put a pause on this or slow it down so that more properties can get into the hands of our children and their children so that they have something to pass down to their children. Does that make sense? Okay, good.
So you touched on abortion a little bit, but abortion in many polls is the biggest concern for women. What is your message to women on the topic of abortion and if they elect you to the U.S. Senate?
One of the things that they need to understand about me is that abortion for me is it's personal for a lot of different reasons. One, Black women die in childbirth. Black women are the first to feel the brunt of any type of breakdown like this. And keep in mind, the urgency for me has to deal with, as a Black woman, we didn't own our own bodies. We didn't own our own milk own our own milk when we did have children. So as a female, a black female, know that I don't want that for any woman whatsoever, black, white, or whatever. We need to have control of our own bodies. And that the abortion decision is up to women. I trust women to make those decisions. And how dare anyone push legislation up a woman when she's most vulnerable. And that's the most vulnerable time of a woman's life, when she's learned that she's pregnant. The most vulnerable time. So how dare they? How dare they? So when I go to Washington, D.C., this is at the top of, I'm going with gloves on. I'm going with gloves on. I'm ready to fight this out. So whatever it takes. So know that. They just know that. So,
do you think your opponent would support a national abortion ban?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. He's part of that Project 2025, that whole Heritage Foundation mess. And of course, they're wanting an abortion ban, a national abortion ban. We can't let that happen. We cannot let that happen. And so, you know, my opponent refuses a debate with me. I want him to answer for that. I want him to be on the stage and answer, why is that? Why are you blocking women's ability to make choices for themselves? Why are you denying the election? Why are you doing these things that are taking us backwards? Why are you attacking anything that has to do with DEI? Why are you anti-woke? That's ridiculous. I want him on the stage so that he can explain to the American people why he has chosen these archaic, these sanctimonious policies. It makes no sense to me. So he owes it to American people. And the thing about it is this is the first time in the history of Indiana to have a female as the U.S. Senate candidate. The first time in the history, especially a black female, right? But also just a female. And do you know, this is the first time in the history of Indiana, according to the Debate Commission, that a senatorial candidate refuses to debate. That's disrespectful to women, and that's disrespectful to the voters of Indiana. He needs to answer for that.
What's your closing statement to Hoosiers as to why they should send you to the U.S. Senate?
Because we have an opportunity here to send someone that understands science, send someone who has the fierceness to do it, send someone who is not insane, send someone who is clear about what the issues are, that it matters, that they can trust. Send someone with the character to get the job done. That's why they need to vote for Dr. Valerie McCray. I can do the job. I can't wait to do the job of a senator.
Dr. Valerie McCray, U.S. Democratic Senate candidate, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.